when an icon of Hollywood walks into what should be a standard interview, only to find himself in the middle of a confrontation nobody predicted. This is the story of one of those moments that shocked live television when Sylvester Stallone, a man whose name is recognized by everyone, regardless of age, was pushed to his limits and ended up reacting in a way that millions of us watched, stunned into silence. But before we get into it, do me a favor and subscribe now and tell me down below in the comments, what do you think finally tipped this thing over the edge? It was an ordinary morning in the View Studios here in Manhattan. Sylvester Stallone arrived early, relaxed, professional. The focus was entirely on his upcoming film release. His publicist had assured him it would be a light, casual chat. Just another pit stop on his lengthy press junket tour. Even in his 70s, Stallone possessed a charisma that solidified his status as an international legend. Seated in the makeup chair, he stayed calm as a crew whizzed around him, getting everything ready for the live broadcast. "We are so excited to have you here today, Mr. Stallone," said one production assistant, beaming. "Everyone is really eager to hear about your new movie and all of your amazing work over the years." Stallone nodded, his signature husky voice a low rumble. "Yeah, sounds good. Happy to discuss anything." But as the seconds ticked down toward the start of the show, there was a palpable tension in the air, almost imperceptible, but definitely there. At the heart of it was Joy Behar. During the pre-show meeting, her usual spirited commentary took on a decidedly different edge. "I've got some real questions to ask Rocky today," she said with a grin. Time to dig deep. Was this simply her standard banter, or was there something more calculated at play here? The cameras started rolling. The iconic theme music blasted through the studio, and for a moment all seemed normal. The hosts sat down with beaming smiles and high energy. Joy had a thick folder overflowing with notes, far more preparation than she'd typically undertake for a guest. "Welcome back to The View," she announced, her voice smooth. "We have the legendary Sylvester Stallone joining us today, the star of Rocky, Rambo, and countless other cinematic masterpieces. Sly, welcome." Stallone leaned in, his hands clasped. "Thank you for having me. Great to be here with everyone." At first, the interview followed the predictable script. Then a subtle shift in tone. "So, Sly, your new film," Joy began. A beat of silence. "At your age, you're still appearing in action movies. Isn't it about time you made way for younger talent?" The room froze. The audience, moments earlier roaring with applause, fell into an eerie silence. No one had expected this. Stallone, despite a flicker of unease crossing his features, remained composed. "Well, Joy," he answered calmly, "as long as people are still interested in these stories, and I'm able to make them, I don't think age is that big a deal. You know, Clint Eastwood is still working wonders in his 80s. It seemed he had expertly diffused the situation, but Joy wasn't done. "Clint Eastwood is Clint Eastwood," she retorted, her voice sharpening. "And let's be honest, your recent films haven't set box office records. Isn't this really driven by your ego and not by popular demand?" The silence in the room became deafening. This was no longer just an interview. It was something far more intense. Stallone's jaw tightened slightly, but his tone remained measured. "I think the box office results speak for themselves," he said evenly. "Expendables was successful, and Creed was able to introduce Rocky to a new generation. People are still emotionally invested in these characters. I'm not here for my ego. I'm here because the stories are still important. The pressure didn't let up. Joy turned through her notes, almost theatrically, as if building toward her ultimate point. And when we talk about Creed, she continued, wasn't that really Michael B. Jordan's movie? Were you just there for nostalgia, playing the same character you played 40 years ago? You could feel the tension escalate in the room. Whoopi Goldberg tried to interject, her voice gentle but firm. Joy, I think our audience really wants to know how Sly keeps himself in such amazing shape. But Joy cut her off. No, I want to hear this answer, she insisted, her gaze fixed on Stallone. Because I feel like Hollywood has this tendency to have aging stars who don't want to step aside. They just keep revisiting their old roles, and it takes up space that new talent could be utilizing. The air crackled with unspoken questions. Was this tough investigative journalism? Or was it personal? Stallone's hands, resting on the table, slowly clenched. His posture was rigid, his voice still controlled. But something had irrevocably shifted. There was a new sharpness to him, subtle but palpable. Everyone in the studio and everyone watching at home could feel it. Something was about to erupt. Something that would transform an ordinary interview into a moment that would be remembered forever. So what happened next? How did a man who's spent decades under the spotlight react when pushed too far? On national television? Stick with me, because what followed next was legendary. Joy, I'm not entirely sure what your point is, Stallone responded calmly but firmly. I've been out here for more than 5 decades, building characters that people actually connect with. Rocky Balboa is more than just a character. He's a symbol of hope and of fighting back when the odds are against you. And if that story continues to connect with audiences, why should I be apologetic for continuing to tell that story? But Joy didn't soften, not at all. Or is it really about the money? She pushed, leaning forward conspiratorially. These franchises are a gold mine. Is it possible you're just squeezing them for every last dollar, whether the story really means anything anymore or not? You could feel the temperature in the room instantly drop. Around the table, the other hosts exchanged anxious looks, and the producers behind the cameras frantically tried to regain control, realizing the segment had spiraled into a full-blown confrontation. Stallone took a slow, measured breath, a lifetime of experience in front of the cameras guiding him as he carefully selected his words. Look, Joy, he said, his voice measured. Everyone is allowed their opinion on movies and careers and all of it. And I understand where you're coming from, but I think you're perhaps missing why these stories continued connect, and why these characters matter to audiences across generations. But the retort was immediate. Do they really? Joy shot back. Or is it simply the old boys club working its magic, greenlighting projects based on who you know, rather than the quality of the work? The words hung in the air, thick and heavy, like a storm cloud about to break. For the first time, something flickered in Stallone's expression. The polished veneer, the practiced calm, fractured slightly. Excuse me, he said, his voice dropping to a deeper, sharper register. What are you suggesting, Joy? The tension was now palpable, but instead of backing down, Joy leaned even further forward, almost as if she'd been waiting for this moment. I'm not suggesting anything, she declared flatly. I'm stating it outright. The entertainment industry runs on favors and personal connections, and people like you have been thriving under that system for decades. All the while, fresh and diverse talent struggles to find similar footing. At this point, the sheer discomfort at the table was impossible to ignore. Sarah Haynes frantically scanned her notes. Alyssa Farah Griffin's eyes darted nervously toward the producers, and even the typically unflappable Whoopi Goldberg looked like she was preparing to call it a day. Joy, perhaps we could change the subject, Whoopi intervened gently. Sly does have an amazing philanthropy history. But Joy cut her off, her voice growing louder. No, I think this is important, she insisted. We're always talking about representation and opportunity, yet we continue to celebrate people who continue to occupy space that a more deserving individual could have had. And that was the moment everything shifted. Stallone's eyes narrowed and, in a fraction of a second, captured by the cameras, a look was flashed across his face that would be replayed endlessly in the coming days. It wasn't just anger. It was something deeper than that. The look of a man who had spent his entire career being underestimated, dismissed, and taken for granted, and who had simply had enough. Let me tell you something, Joy, he began, his voice low and resonant. I was never given anything in this business. I wrote Rocky because nobody would give me a chance. I sold my dog just to make rent when I was trying to get that script off the ground. The studios may have bought the movie, but they didn't buy me. They bought a younger, safer actor to fit their mold. Joy interrupted again. That was decades ago, she said dryly. What has kept you going in recent years besides revisiting the same character? The studio fell into a stunned silence. No applause, no sound, just anticipation. Stallone slowly leaned back in his chair, his body language shifting. This was no longer a defense. This was something different. What have I been doing lately? He repeated, his voice hardening. I've provided numerous opportunities for other actors in The Expendables. I've championed new directors and writers. I've used my voice to tell stories of resilience, of people who fight for what's right, for what's better. But Joy wouldn't back down. All while keeping yourself in the center of the frame, she retorted, a sharp, almost sarcastic laugh escaping her lips. It's quite a coincidence how all these opportunities still manage to revolve around you. And in that exact moment, everything broke. You could see it, as clearly as if it were written in the stars. The precise instant when patience snapped. When years of pressure, criticism, and hard-earned success finally collided. The exact moment Sylvester Stallone had finally reached his breaking point. So what does a man who has built his entire legacy on resilience do when he's pushed just a little too far? Live on air? What happened next? Nobody in that studio was prepared for. His voice dropped again, to a near whisper this time. But the weight in it was enough to make the whole room shrink. You know what, Joy? I've been sitting here trying to be polite, trying to play along, but I'm starting to get the feeling that this isn't even about movies and representation anymore. It's personal, Joy faltered. Her expression slipped just for a moment. I don't have anything personal against you, she replied. I'm just asking the questions everyone is thinking. But Stallone wouldn't let it go. No, he stated with a newfound force. You're not asking questions. You're making accusations. You're sitting there painting me as some relic, someone who needs to get out of the way so that your narrative can flow. The mood shifted dramatically. The energy in the studio tightened, the cameras zooming in at the table, and the eyes of everyone in the room locked onto the ensuing conversation. I don't have a narrative, Joy retorted, though her voice lacked the conviction it had moments ago. Stallone leaned in, his gaze unflinching. Really? Because I'm seeing someone who's got a problem with people who have built something. Someone who believes that after you've been in this business for X amount of years, you just need to pack your bags and make room for the next generation. The atmosphere grew stiflingly tense. The other hosts remained frozen, clearly unsure of whether to step in or not, content to let the scene unfold live on air. That's not what I said, Joy replied, but the defensiveness was already starting to creep into her tone. It is exactly what you said, Stallone shot back. You question my right to work. You question my motives. You imply that I'm taking jobs away from other people just by doing what I've done for the last 40 years of my life. He paused, his voice hardening with each syllable. And you did so in that dismissive, condescending tone of yours, as if you and only you have the right to judge who deserves success and who doesn't. Joy tried to take control again, straightening up in her seat. Look, Sly, I think you're being a bit too sensitive, she said. I'm merely highlighting an issue in Hollywood, that it needs new talent, and maybe people like you need to make room. But the air had irrevocably shifted. There was no turning back now. Oversensitive, Stallone repeated, his voice raising in volume for the first time in the interview. Let me tell you what oversensitive looks like. He leaned forward, his voice calm, but each word carefully chosen. It looks like this, using your platform to publicly tear down a guest who is there to discuss his film, and passing it off as an interview. These are not personal attacks, Joy insisted, her confidence, however, completely gone. Then what are they? Stallone countered. Because over the last 10 minutes, you've called me too old, too greedy, said I'm stealing other people's jobs, and that I'm part of the problem. What do you call that, if not personal? The audience sat stunned, frozen by the spectacle. No applause, no whispers, just silence. This was not an interview. It was something raw and unfiltered, impossible to look away from. And then Joy did something that shifted the whole landscape. Well, maybe that's just what happens when people get old, she scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. You become a little oversensitive. Maybe that's a sign that it's time to step back. The room collectively gasped. A line had been crossed. Stallone stood perfectly still for a moment, his gaze fixed on Joy. His expression was controlled, but barely, and when he spoke, his voice was low and deadly. Did you just call me old and weak on national television? Joy let out a nervous, brittle laugh, attempting to diffuse the situation, but it only made things worse. I just meant maybe you're not taking criticism the way you used to. And at that very second, everything broke. With a sudden surge of adrenaline, Stallone sprang up, slamming his hands onto the table, the crack echoing through the studio. The audience gasped. Some jolted in their seats. The cameras, impossible to cut away, caught it all. This was television history. Constructive criticism? Stallone boomed, his voice shaking with rage. Do you think that's what you've been doing for the past 15 minutes? The intensity of his voice, the look in his eyes, it was clear He had reached his breaking point. He leaned forward, ready to unleash his full fury. Joy, you want to talk about age? About sensitivity? What followed would leave the studio in absolute shock. Now let me tell you about age, said Stallone in a voice both low and rumbling. I am 77, and I have been in this business for a hell of a long time, longer than you've ever been in front of a camera. I've dealt with actual criticism and actual rejection. I've taken beatings you can't even imagine. Joy tried to interject. He cut it short instantly. No, you've had your say, he said flatly. You've just spent the last several minutes tearing me down. You're going to sit there and take this. The studio fell silent. Whoopi nervously reached for her earpiece, no doubt getting instructions from the control booth, but she paused. No one wanted to cut into what was happening, and Stallone was far from done. You want to talk about taking opportunities away, he said, his voice rising. What about the opportunity you just took from your audience? An opportunity to hear something of substance? To learn about storytelling? About the essence of crafting characters that last? He shook his head in utter frustration. Instead, you turn this into a personal attack, dressed up in the guise of some social justice crusade. Sly, I think you should calm down, Joy tried to say, but her voice wavered. Calm down? Stallone scoffed with a sharp, disbelieving laugh. You spent an entire segment questioning my career, my work, and my right to be here, and then you tell me to calm down? The studio remained dead silent, with only the faint hum of the cameras audible. I've been Rocky Balboa for 50 years, he continued, his voice now imbued with the full weight of what he'd held back. Do you realize what that means? It means 50 years of being told I wasn't good enough, not smart enough, not the right look. 50 years of defying the odds. He leaned forward, his gaze fixed on Joy. And now you, comfortable in your seat, dismiss it all because it doesn't fit your narrative. Joy opened her mouth to respond, but Stallone raised its hand, silencing her. You want to talk about representation? He asked. Then let's talk about it honestly. The studio seemed to collectively hold its breath. When I wrote Rocky, I was a nobody, he explained. A struggling actor from Philadelphia who couldn't get a break. The studios wanted the script, but they wanted someone else in the lead role. Someone more bankable, someone safer. His voice tightened with emotion. I refused. I fought for 2 years to play that role. They told me I was making a mistake, that my career was over before it had even begun. He paused, then drove his point home. But I believed in that story. I believed that working-class people deserve to see themselves as heroes. That's representation, he said firmly. That's diversity. Rocky wasn't a polished, perfect star. He was a guy from South Philly who got knocked down and kept getting back up. But that was then, Joy weakly tried to interject. No, Stallone cut her off. That's now. That's every single day. The intensity surged again. You think success means I've forgotten where I came from? You think I don't know what it feels like to be counted out? To be told, you don't belong? His voice was now less anger and more raw truth. To have people like you decide whether or not someone has earned their success? The cameras captured every bit of it. The raw emotion, the unbridled frustration, the unmistakable authenticity of a man pushed to his absolute limit. And you know what the worst part is? Stallone continued. You had a real opportunity today. A genuine opportunity. to talk about storytelling, about perseverance, about building something that lasts. He shook his head slowly. But instead, you chose to tear someone down, and that says more about you than it ever will about me. A beat of silence passed. Then Stallone adjusted his jacket, turning to face the camera directly. "To everyone watching," he said, his tone now calm but resolute, "I came here to discuss work I believe in, stories I'm passionate about, and characters that have resonated with audiences for generations." He paused. "Instead, I was ambushed." He turned back to Joy, his voice now ice cold. "You want to talk about creating space for new talent? I've launched careers. I've invested in young filmmakers. I've used my own resources to give people chances when no one else would. But I guess none of that fits your narrative. All that matters is that you get to play the part of the aggressor." Without another word, he stood up. Deliberately and calmly, he removed his microphone and set it on the table. "I'm done," he announced. "This isn't journalism. It's an ambush, and I'm not staying for it." And with that, he walked off the set. The studio was left in a stunned silence, with no applause or movement, just pure shock. The cameras, however, kept rolling, capturing Joy's shocked expression, the uncomfortable hosts, and the undeniable aftermath of a moment that had spiraled far beyond anyone's expectations. What began as a routine interview had morphed into an unforgettable showdown, a breaking point, and a moment that would be replayed and dissected for years to come. So, what do you think? Did Joy go too far? Or was this a reaction that was long overdue? If you found this captivating, don't forget to subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments below.